Red Glass by Laura Rousseau. Chapter 12, Section 4. Nights were when Angel could sneak into the kitchen with us and drink coffee and eat pink sugar-coated rolls and talk. Still, we were usually surrounded by people, so he secretly let his arms brush mine as he walked by or let his leg rest against mine at the table. Small, almost imperceptible things. Things I might have been imagining. Just before bed, we brushed our teeth by the cistern, a huge concrete basin of water, and washed our faces. Angel and I lingered and talked for an hour, alone, standing close enough for me to make out his dimple in the faint light. We talked, easily, about anything that came to mind. I told him about a showdown between a puppy and a turkey over a tortilla scrap. He told me about how he'd learned to talk to a burro. He showed me how you make a burro trot by pursing your lips and making rapid-fire kisses. While our words were gently bobbing along on the surface, underneath, my feelings were darting like fish. Feelings of wanting to reach out my finger and touch his dimple, and more. When there were pauses in the conversation, I thought, now we will kiss. In those moments, he looked as though he was going to say something important. A few times he took a breath and opened his mouth and then closed it again. But just when the space between our bodies was shrinking, I felt awkward and nervous, and my hands shook, and I grew conscious of a zit on my cheek and wondered if my hair looked frizzy. And I heard myself saying, well, good night, and walked inside to the mattress that I shared with Nola. And as she made strange little noises in her sleep, I lay awake, furious with myself. I didn't mind sleeping with Nola. She smelled like farm animals and musty chicken pins and tree bark and sweet urine. She smelled like oldness, but an outdoor oldness. Not an oldness that came from sitting in front of a TV all day or playing bingo in a nursing home, but an oldness as natural as ancient trees and drying riverbeds and layers of sediment eroding on mountains. Nola whispered things in her sleep that only I could hear. Not Spanish. Was it the language of sleep or Mixteco? Did her murmurs offer wisdom gathered over the course of a century? Dika and Abuelita shared a mattress where they ate fruitcake and talked and giggled like two girls at summer camp who hadn't seen each other for ages. You'd think they were the oldest and best of friends. Comadre, they started calling each other. Co-mother, the closest two women can be without being related by blood or marriage. One night, I overheard Abuelita say to Dika, oh, how you and Sophie remind me of the Gitanos. Gitanos, I asked. That was a word I'd never heard before. Gypsies, Dika said. I propped up on my elbow and looked over at Abuelita. Why? Your skin and your accents, Abuelita said, like the Gitanos. They were buenas personas, like you, good people. They came and painted wagons in the very old days. They performed dances and songs for us. And later, they started setting up a big screen outside and showing movies. Maria Santísima, Parisima, how I love those movies. And the ladies went from house to house telling fortunes. We gave them tomatoes or eggs in exchange for a card reading. Oh, how I miss them. They no longer come. Why not? Dika asked. Abuelita shrugged. ¿Quién sabe? And she whispered, you know, I have some Gitana blood. Really? I said. Abuelita gestured to Nola, asleep beside me. Abuelita smiled. and began her story. Long ago, when Nola was 17, she fell in love with a young Gitano man who traveled with his companions from town to town, staying for several weeks in each place. He met Nola on his first day in town, and over the next weeks, they spent every minute together. The man asked her to marry him and travel with his Gitano family. She adored him, but her parents and neighbors disapproved. It was one thing to be entertained by Gitanos, they said, but quite another to marry one. So her family advised her to find a man from her own village to marry. After much agonizing, she told the man to leave without her, since she couldn't go against the wishes of her parents. But he begged her to come and said he couldn't live without her. She finally lied, trying to make it easier on him, and claimed she was in love with a man from her village. Her relatives convinced her there were many other good men, and that she would easily fall in love with another and forget all about this Gitano. The day after he left, she suddenly regretted her decision. She realized she would never meet another like him. She considered chasing after him, taking a horse and galloping to the next village where they were headed. But her parents told her, "Daughter, wait until next year when he comes back. Then, if he has been faithful to you, you can marry him." Secretly, they thought she would forget about him and find a local boy to marry. A month later, she still thought of nothing but him. Then she discovered she was pregnant with his child. 8 months later, she had the baby. She hoped and prayed he would come back. This time she would go with him, she promised herself. The baby was 3 months old when the Gitanos returned. She watched for her lover and didn't see him. Finally, she asked the other Gitanos about him. They shook their heads sorrowfully and said he was so heartbroken he had left for America to try to forget her. 80 years passed. She never married. Her son had children who gave her great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren, and not a day went by that she didn't think of her Gitano lover and regret letting him go. When Abuelita stopped speaking, Dika clucked, Poor Nola." I didn't say anything. The story seemed terribly sad to me. I let my hair fall over my eyes to hide my tears. Was that what Nola was whispering as she dreamed? Regret for a risk she didn't take? Mr. Lorenzo and Angel were planning to leave on Monday. Only 3 more evenings with Angel. 3 more chances to take a step toward him. 1 step. Maybe that was all it would take.